there is currently in our country, there's not one single county in the entire U.S. that has enough housing for people below 30% of AMR.
I took one econ class, but I do remember this concept of supply and demand. So if you want rents to level off or go down, introduce more supply.
All right, buckle up. On today's episode of the Real Estate Anonymous podcast, you're going to need a big thing of glue that you can huff periodically, and we are going to talk about affordable housing. We're going to talk about Section 8 contracts, low-income housing tax credit, and the infinite wisdom that leads someone to spending $615,000 per unit to create affordable housing. Hope you enjoy. Welcome in another edition of the Real Estate Anonymous podcast. Elliot White, Eric Weatherholtz, Brett Moss. We're going to get into a totally screwed up affordable housing deal today. You know, people often say, yeah, affordable housing is such a hard problem to solve and the system's inefficient, there's a waste of money, but it's hard to find an example. Well, good news for you today. I'm going to show you exactly what it's like when someone squanders like $50 to $60 million solving a problem that doesn't exist. So we're going to get into an affordable housing deal that's got Section 8 contract, tax credit, it's got the PFC structure, it's got public opposition, the mayor doesn't even like it. And yet it is a thing that is going to come into existence. It's been approved. I'll show you the sources and uses. I'll show you the development fees. It's going to be a thing that you will love and hate at the exact same time, perhaps kind of like this podcast. But before we get into the totally screwed up affordable housing deal, we took about a 2-week break, celebrated the holidays, New Year's, and we're now back. So we'll kind of go around the horn here. Brett, as I made a comment, you're looking like you survived the battle and you're back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know what they say is it's you've got to win a few battles to win the war, and it's the holidays, man. It just takes it out of you, especially with 3 younger kids. I had box cutter boy in here for a little bit, and gave him 2 box cutters, and he did even better with 2. So. But I appreciate the compliment, Elliot, and I just would expect next for you to say, "Don't sell yourself short, Judge. You're a tremendous slouch."
You are a tremendous slouch.
We're doing great.
I think I'm going to order a slingshot and a box of steel ball bearings and ship them to your office for box cutter boy to play with.
Oh, good. There was a putter that was put through the wall here, of which nobody has claimed, but literally the head of the putter through the drywall. And then, so this is post, I don't know, this post Thanksgiving. And like the maintenance people are like, what the heck is going on? And like, I'm asking, some of the analysts, some of the other folks, I'm like, guys, like, what happened here? They're like, it wasn't us. It's the only thing I can think of is that was box cutter boy.
There's some real small guy doing it.
Yeah.
that planted that into the drywall and was like, yeah, I'm out. I can't figure out how to get this out.
Right. It was Brett's stabby kid throwing the putter around.
Some angry guy who's like 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
Eric, what's new with you, sir?
Life's good. I got a little taste of the other Florida. I didn't call our man Brett, but went to Palm Beach for a few days, and you step across that bridge and there's a whole different Florida over there. Kind of fascinating to see like the retail scene there. You put in Zillow on that island. We've driving around, put into the Zillow, show me what's available under 3 million. Nada.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Show me and a handful of things under 5. Then the other trippy thing is you've got this island that's basically unoccupied 6 months a year. So you've got some of the great, one of the great shopping streets, in the country, but it's only activated for a portion of the year. And really, most of the sales, talking with some of the merchants down there, most of their sales are happening in like a, 2-month period, 2 to 3 month period during the season. Anyway, it's a super interesting little microcosm, because across the bridge you've got West Palm, which is just going off, but it's got some super swell parts, but really a place for the masses. And come across the bridge and you've got almost a ghost town for most of the year, and people are still paying 150, $300 a foot in rent.
It's a different world down there. I'd say
Yeah.
once you get to Palm Beach County South, the more north you go in Florida, the more southern it gets, which is add that to the
Yeah.
list of
Yeah.
counterintuitive things about Florida.
The other trippy part was you can't get close to Mar-a-Lago, which is down at the south end of the island. And so you're driving past, all these, 20, 50, $100 million homes. And then the streets shut off. And it's the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. But then surrounding that, it's like there was like a herd of pickups filled with guys drinking beer in the bed of pickups holding Trump flags.
Yeah, that's right.
It's an incredible sociology study of just how that whole thing works. Anyway, pretty fantastic.
I was up and saw my in-laws, and then after that I went up to Vermont, and I somehow missed all the great skiing. It was 45 and rainy when we were there, and as soon as we left, they got 2.5 feet of snow. So really excited about my timing. But we're back in the swing, and we got some stuff in the pipeline. We got some deals going on. I'm working from home today, hence the ironworker hoodie and looking generally like a stereotypical Boston shady character. I actually thought about doing this podcast with my hood up, which I thought would be the appropriate look here.
I think that's working. I think that's
looks like a guy could have a pipe in his trunk.
Yeah,
for sure.
Sully. Sully.
When you buy the trunk pipe, they throw in this hoodie for free.
Because
this is actually
the pipe's made out of iron. So it makes sense.
It's an iron worker's hoodie from Local 7.
For those that missed the episode, our man Elliot went deep on what it's like in South Boston to meet somebody that carries a pipe. And by pipe, we mean like tire iron or iron piece of pipe that, you can go and beat somebody's ass with. Yeah,
just a miscellaneous 18-inch long piece of metal that they're ready, willing, and able to put upside your head.
Yeah. None of that weak PVC stuff, right?
Yeah, no.
Full iron, baby.
Yeah. But we got a fun one today. I talked about it a bit. It's been in affordable housing long enough that you can see sometimes when the machine runs over the poor people it's supposed to protect. I've seen that happen in person when you watch local governments make a bad decision that harms people because they can't get out of their own way. And I've also seen the incredible waste in the system. I saw this deal when it came out, and it's now been publicly approved, and I'm going to share the economics behind it, and I'll sort of talk you guys through it. So we've got a deal called Travis Park Apartments. It's 199 units in Austin, Texas. Let's see if I can share my screen here and sort of talk you guys through this. But you guys able to see this on a map?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So we're in Austin. This is downtown Austin. It's Travis Park Apartments. I actually own some property down in this area and some stuff north. I know Austin well. This is a good little pocket. Travis Heights is, I don't know how much time you spend in Austin, but it's sort of gentrifying really rapidly. But you can go into some of these neighborhoods and it is almost happening house by house, where it's sort of one rundown house right next to this brand new $1.5 million new construction. I mean, it's really pretty wild to see. But so Travis Park is in an up and coming part of town, but it's not a very high end part of town yet. It's just kind of a nice area that's absorbing a lot of the population influx. I saw this deal when it came out. I immediately recognized what was going on here. We refused to bid on it. Just so you guys won't bury the lead, this deal sold for about $330,000 per unit. And if you think, well, that seems rich, yeah, it fucking is.
It is.
It was built in 1970. So new construction in Austin should be selling somewhere around there. This deal was built in 1970. It's 199 units. It has a 100% Section 8 contract on it, or a HAP contract. And basically the way to think about Section 8 is there are the houses, there's sort of two branches on the tree. I'll simplify as best I can, but there's housing choice vouchers for individual tenants to bring to whatever apartment complex they want to live in. And then there are these HAP contracts, housing assistance payment contracts, which is basically a contract that stays at the property. And so the property has a contract with HUD. HUD is paying typically, depends on the tenant profile, but anywhere between 75 and 95% of the rent. Tenant is responsible for paying 30% of their income. HUD pays the difference. So you've got this really, really durable cash flow because it's basically a government contract with real estate attached to it. And I'll give you guys an idea of kind of the site and the property. This is what it looks like. It's got the old mansard roofs. It needs a renovation. There's no question about that. I'm not going to dispute the need for renovation. But given the Section 8 contract, you'd find plenty of people who would buy it and then renovate it and try and mark up the rents. Section 8 contracts typically allow you to mark up the rents every 5 years. I mean, there's ways you can do it sooner, but so you've got a deal in a growing part of town with a Section 8 contract that should be renovated. And now you're probably thinking, okay, well, what do the economics look like? Why would you buy a deal like this? How do you make any money? And sadly, I'm going to show you. So before we get into the fees and those kinds of things and how it gets structured, I thought I'd see if you boys had any thoughts about this style of construction or Austin in general.
And Austin's amazing. I mean, I agree with everything you've said about Austin, and I feel like Austin's become a gateway city very quickly. I mean, on a relative basis. I mean, I think kind of post GFC, they went from it's still what 2 million people in the MSA, but I mean, you've got an F1 race, you've got a lot of Fortune 500 companies that have major presences there. So I mean, I'd say F1 race and Fortune 500 companies is pretty darn close to a gateway city in my book. And you never seem to have a bad time there either.
It's a great city. It's been interesting. There's a ton of supply, though that's being delivered and has kind of crested. There are still people moving to Austin. There's still a lot of reasons to love this city. So you kind of hear these stories about how rents went crazy in Austin and now rents are going through the floor. And that's all sort of very short term, but everything eventually reverts to the mean, and it's a great town. There's a ton going on here.
And this location, I agree with your comment too, Elliot. I mean, this seems to be kind of one of the South Austin area appears to be one of the last places where you can do kind of what you were mentioning, where find some value and however you want to add value, whether it's on a personal residence or this sweet deal that you're going to get into the details on.
Yeah. So I'm going to zoom in here just so you guys, I want to lay the foundation for what is about to happen. This, you can see right here, the current rent and the post-rehab rent. Now this is a broker estimation, but these guys, I know these brokers, they're good. They're usually correct on this kind of thing. So I don't think that these are just broker numbers. But you've got 1-bed rents at $1,350, 2-bed rents at $1,750, and 3-bed rents a little over $2,000. Those are your in-place rents. What they are projecting for a post-rehab rent is $2,000 for a 1-bed, so a $650 per unit increase. They're projecting $2,600 for the 2-beds, so that's about an $800 or $900 increase. And they're projecting $3,350 for the 3-beds, so that's a $1,300 rent increase. These are massive, massive increases. And because of the way the Section 8 program works, the tenants don't feel any change. Tenants are still paying 30% of their income. The tenants don't care what happens to the rent. This is simply HUD is paying more money. And so there's a bit of an argument for, well, you're really improving the property. And the way the Section 8 program is supposed to work, you can renovate your property and show HUD that comparable properties are getting this rent and you're owed this rent. And fundamentally, that's how the Section 8 program should work. It shouldn't penalize landlords for having Section 8 rentals. It should say, hey, you can rent to Section 8 tenants and achieve similar rent that you would achieve if this were market rate housing. And I think the two of you would probably agree that that's directionally correct.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
Now, where things start to get a little squirrely is you begin to take a look at what they have for their comps. And so we're going to take a look at, the rent comps. We'll get to the sales comps in a minute. These are the as-is rent comps, and these are what you would expect. We are looking at a 70s built multifamily project. We have other 70s built multifamily projects here, their rents, and it lists probably 4 or 6 of them, whatever it is. And you can kind of go, okay, well, this all makes sense, but these rents seem much lower than the pro forma rent. But these are perhaps the as is, so I guess this is fair. You can get your brain to a place where you think this is tracking so far with what I believe to be true. Then you take it a step further and you say, okay, but they're renovating. They're talking about a big rent increase. What are they using for their renovated rent comps?
Post reno rent comps, yeah.
Right. Well, this is what those look like. They're talking about deals built in the mid to late, 2012, 2016, really nice stuff. Like a different, not even close to the same type of property. High rises, better locations. It's not a fair comparison. But this is how the Section 8 program, unfortunately, has been bastardized to work, where you can say, well, they're similar. And the three of us on this call, and I'd say most of our viewers or listeners, understand that these are not similar. They're not the fucking same thing,
They're similar in that there are windows and roofs,
right, and residents.
Yeah,
right. But
check.
They're in America.
Check.
Right. So the way that you would think you'd go about it is to be looking for similar vintage 70s, 80s built properties that had been renovated. And you would say, hey, these deals got renovated and we're going to renovate ours. And because we're providing a similar product, we should get a rent increase of $100, $200, whatever it is. That's not what's happening here. So they're already anchoring to these very nice comps and a massive increase. And I'll give you guys just a quick math on what the increase is going to look like. You are going from an in-place rent. Their current contract rent is $341,498. They're getting about $4 million a year in rent. That's good rent. Their renovated rent is going to be $6.2 million a year. So you are basically extracting $2.2 million in additional annual rent from HUD through a process that I kind of fundamentally don't agree with. I got kind of cornered after my talk out in LA for saying that rent reasonableness studies should be done, that we should look at, is this rent reasonable? HUD does this sporadically because of stuff like this. This is a bad use of public dollars. You do not need to pay $6.2 million for this housing because this housing is not similar. So that's kind of the first thing that stands out to me. Next, they're going to be doing a low-income housing tax credit transaction. But this is kind of the fee structure for this deal, and this is public information. You can go take a look at this whenever you want, right here. These are the fees associated with buying this deal. So the total financing, the total cost of this project is $122 million. And I'm going to help you out with the math real quick. We got 122, 511, 188 divided by 199 units. Your total basis in this deal is $615,000.
All right, let's just take a quick time out for some context. What would a high rise in downtown Boston sell for today? Probably lower than that.
High rise? Yeah. The nicest high rise. Yeah, probably in that area. Brand new construction, ultra high end rents. You're not seeing anything in Florida. Maybe the nicest deal in Miami trades there.
No, I mean,
I don't know.
That's an astronomical number.
It's an astronomical number.
Sorry to get him sorry to jump in there, Elliot, because I think you're going to break it down and say the real basis of the deal is X. So there's X amount of fees in there, right?
Yeah, you can see it listed right here. I assume you guys can see this fee breakdown, but I'll talk through it. It's you, and just so everyone on this pod is clear, replacement cost for garden style product in Austin is about $200,000 a unit.
Yeah.
So instead of putting $615,000 into 199 units, you could literally, for the same fucking dollars, you could build 400 additional units and renovate this property. Or you could take that same dollar amount and build 600 units of brand new construction. You want to know why affordable housing is so screwed up? This is why. This is a horrible use of public funds. It just is. I don't care how you slice it. I understand that this is part of how these programs work, but it's not how they were originally intended to work. It just isn't.
Right. Right.
This is not functionally correct. And if the goal is to create more affordable housing for that total dollar amount, you could do a lot more good. But this deal has been approved. This is a done deal. This is not me speculating. This is not someone's pro forma. This is from public records. This is the breakdown of the fees. So the contractor is going to get paid $3 million. And for this kind of a project, they've got hard construction costs of $22 million. I guess that's fine. They're getting a permanent loan for $64 million. They say developer investor equity, which is sort of a cute way of saying that they have tax credit investors. The developer isn't putting $40 million in. The developer is getting an issuance of low-income housing tax credits. And they are then selling those tax credits to a tax credit investor. So they're getting, I don't know, $30 million in credits. It'll probably say in more detail how much they're asking for in credits. But they're getting millions of dollars in tax credits to renovate this deal. So more public funds are being used to push the rent on a HUD property, which will use more public funds to pay the owner. They're buying the deal for $69,500,000. They've got $2.5 million in soft costs, which is probably correct. They're getting paid a $14.4 million developer fee. That's how much money the developer is getting paid for doing this. Out of that $14 million, they have to defer $6.9 million. And the way the deferred developer fee works is you have to demonstrate that over the 10 years of your project, there's sufficient cash flow to pay that off.
So it's kind of an earn out.
Yeah, it used to be that you would get the full fee up front, but they've started trying to tighten down on that. And so that deferred developer fee gets really paid out before anything. It basically protects you as a GP, kind of protects your cash flow from your LPs, from the tax credit investors. But they would not finance this project if the developer could not show that the rent and expenses and all that lined up where they were going to get made whole. Then you've got $22 million in hard costs, which is a shitload of money for 199 units. To be more specific, it's $111,000 per unit in rehab. I've toured this deal. It needed rehab. There's no question about it. Could I get what is being done accomplished for half that? Probably. But the way the tax credit program works, you have to replace stuff even if it doesn't need to be replaced. I'll give you an example. We bought a deal, and when we bought it, the owner had put on a new roof 3 years ago. But because the tax credit regulations say the roof has to have 30 years of useful life, ours only had 27 years of useful life, so we had to tear the new fucking roof off and put a new one on.
Seems like that makes a ton of sense.
They're paying $10 million in financing fees. And you remember the $40 million I was talking about? Right there it says developer investor equity and tax credits. They're paying $10 million in financing fees. And you think, all right, well, please tell me that this isn't going to get worse. No, it's like those Ronco rotisserie grills where it's like, but wait, there's more. It's going to get fucking worse, because what they have done here is they have also partnered with the local housing authority through something called a HFC or a PFC. These have come up in the past. So they are partnering with the local housing authority, and they're getting a full tax exemption.
It's a good deal for them.
It's really quite wild. So I think I've sufficiently set this up for you guys to comment. If you have some thoughts, let me know.
Where do you sign up?
How do I get in on some of that action?
But I think, Elliot, you touched on it too earlier. I mean, I think I'm speak for the United States. If you give, Wall Street or somewhat sophisticated capital a set of rules, they're going to figure out how to play the game better than the law or the regulations were written. And you know way more about this than I do, and you know way more about everything than I do. But we've already covered that ground. But like that's kind of where this business. I mean, they're some of the most wealthy people in commercial real estate are low income housing tax credit developers that have been doing this for 30 years because they figured out how to play the game better than everyone else.
Yep.
And they're not doing anything illegal, right? I mean, to be very clear, like it's not illegal. It's just playing.
It's not illegal. Yeah, no. To be perfectly clear, none of this is illegal. But what you are looking at here, just some numbers for people. Typically, you have to pay in these PFC or HFC deals. You have to pay a percentage of the tax savings to the housing authority that you partner with. So let's say it's 25%. Taxes on this property today are $500,000 a year. Well, if you only have to pay 25% of that going forward, let's assume no reassessment. This is likely to get reassessed, but if you assume no reassessment, you have effectively saved $4.5 million in operating costs.
It's material.
Over the life of your hold. So over the life of your hold period, you're saving, let's say in a 10-year deal, you're saving about $4.5 million in operating costs. And that benefit passes on. I mean, that's a recurring cash flow. The real value in these kinds of exemptions is the recurrence of the cash flow, not having to be a non-recurring thing. So you've saved a shitload in your expenses. You've increased your income by getting HUD to pay an extra $2.2 million a year, and you've gotten most of the rehab paid for using low-income housing tax credits.
Explain
so
how
you're
you
not,
would,
and
you would go around and what it would take to buy this.
What it would take to buy this.
How do you get selected?
Well, it's a publicly marketed deal. So it goes out on the market, and basically what you're doing is, as a developer, how do I explain this without the readers dying of boredom? The listeners dying of boredom. There's an application process for low-income housing tax credits. That's kind of the first thing, and so you would fill out the application, and let's assume you get a pretty good response from Texas Department of Housing. And they say, Brett, we like your application. We'd like to learn more about this project. You would put it under contract, and the seller is going to know this. The seller knows how the game works. So the seller will sell the deal contingent upon you getting an allocation of tax credits. It could take a year to 18 months for the deal to close. And so you're going through the tax credit application process. You are also going to be talking with HUD about the Section 8 contract and saying, here's what we're going to deliver. Here's the type of renovation scope we're going to put in. We'd like to sign a new 20-year HAP contract. And we believe that because of the work that we've done, this is what our rents should be. Here's a rent comp study that shows.
There multiple, you can only do this if you have it under contract.
Yeah, the state's not really going to take you seriously. I think if you're looking to get into low-income housing tax credit, every state has something called a qualified allocation plan, or a QAP. And the QAP is basically the government telling Eric, the developer, here's what I'd like to see this year. Here's what the state was prioritizing for projects. So it could be transit-oriented development, could be townhomes for families near commuter hubs, it could be high-rise apartments for seniors. Every state's given some creative control over this, and it changes over the years. But in that QAP, there's basically a scoring tool, and it just asks you questions about, what describe the site, what's the development team look like, what's your experience, what population you're going to be serving, what income set asides. And so you would do that, and you get kind of an initial reading. You go, you know what, I think this project scores pretty well. So you put your offer in contingent upon the successful application. So Eric and I know how the game is played. He's the seller, I'm the buyer. I'd say, Eric, here's what I think we can do. I'm going to pay $70 million or $69.5 million for this project, and it's contingent upon X, Y, Z. And you, because you know how this works, you'd planned on a year and a half closings. You don't really care. It's what you expected. You're trying to maximize pricing. And the whole time you're collecting your rent anyway. So it's not, you don't really lose out. And so you get the allocation of tax credits. And very simply, let's just say you said to the state, I need $10 million in tax credits. And the state likes your project, and they say, Eric, this is great. Here's your $10 million. It's not actually $10 million in cash. It's $10 million in forgiveness of a federal income tax liability. And so that gets sold. You sell that. Basically, you're selling the tax credits to an investor who can use them. Bank of America, Washington Mutual, some large financial institution, because they will buy those credits. So they'll buy them at, let's say, 90 cents on the dollar. And so you get $9 million up front to fund the renovation of your project, and they get the tax credits, they get the passive losses the partnership generates, they get the accelerated depreciation. There's lots of reasons why these tax credit investors get involved, and you get upfront cash to fund the development plus pay your developer fee and those kinds of things. The best way to think about.
So the new buyer is going to put $14 million at a minimum of fees in his pocket, right?
Yeah.
So what is the, on the seller side, one, why would a seller not do this project themselves? And two, what, if you go through that math, they've got to be getting paid more than that 14 to do this, to sell it.
Yeah. So the seller's making good money on the exit, and the seller probably bought at an attractive basis, and the inflated purchase price of $69 million they would not be able to get unless the buyer was able to do this kind of a tax credit transaction. So it sort of seems like, well, why wouldn't they put the 14 million in their pocket? But in a way, they are also benefiting from the machine, because if they sold it to someone who wasn't doing this, they couldn't pay 69 million, they could pay 52 million. And so their choice is, I could do the work myself, eventually get to 69 million, or I could have someone else do it and get paid 69 million.
So as the seller, you really got to pick your pony of somebody that's going to be able to get the allocation.
Yep. Yeah. And building a track record doing these kinds of things takes time. You typically start with smaller deals that are outside of the city center. You build up enough of a reputation where you've been a seller on a deal. You're looking at the bid sheet. You get 8-10 buyers. You're talking with Brett, the broker, and he's giving you some color on like, hey, here's what these guys have done recently. Here's how I feel about their chance of getting the award. I've talked to some folks at Texas Department of Housing. These guys have a good reputation. These guys don't have as great of a reputation. There's a lot of that going on. But you need to pick a horse who you think can successfully navigate HUD, navigate the local housing authority to do the HFC structure, and deal with Texas Department of Housing. This is what I do, but there's a lot of kind of friction involved. So you have to pick the correct person.
I wonder if somebody's going to forward this podcast to Elon.
I hope they do. I'd be happy. I actually I heard some podcast with Vivek Ramaswamy, and he was talking about how efficient the government is. And I was like, I got to email this dude, tell him I'm happy to weigh in on affordable housing. Because I want to be really clear. You should incentivize people to build affordable housing. In fact, I think maybe the affordable housing developer should probably make a little bit more money than the market rate developer, because affordable housing is more complicated and it provides a societal benefit. So if you told me that the market rate developer made $1 million a deal and the affordable housing guy made 1.2 million a deal, I don't know that anybody's really going to care about that. But as Brett pointed out, these laws, they get maneuvered and bastardized in a way that they were never intended. And there's waste in the system. There just is. You can't tell me.
On a site like this, it looks like you can, with the density of that property, you could build twice as many units on that site.
You could. Yeah, it's in this part of town. Let me see the acreage here.
Yeah, it's like 13 or something like that. Does that sound right?
Just look at the aerial.
15.
Yeah, the lot size is 13.71 acres. And in this part of town, you could do wrap product. You could have some density there. You could get more units on that site. I'm not picking on the seller because I know him, and I'm not picking on the brokers because they're good. I'm not picking on the buyers. Like I'm not saying anyone did anything wrong here. I'm saying that the way the affordable housing machine works often is a frustrating misallocation of public funds when you see people living in tents, living on, substandard housing. It's just, not great. And advocates, people who aren't affordable housing developers but have lots of yard signs will tell me, oh, you need to build new affordable housing in the city. I think, well, I don't, maybe, but people aren't like, there was a time in my life where I had no money and I was living in my car. I couldn't afford to live in downtown Boston. It's not a foregone conclusion that you need to have access to every neighborhood all of the time. I think it's a better use of resources to have more affordable housing on the outskirts as opposed to less affordable housing and more people living on the street. Like that to me is, I think that's how I look at this.
What does it take to get to, as a consumer of these, what does it take to get as a resident to get
So because of the Section 8 contract, and Section 8 is available to people who make less than 30% of AMI. So it is truly an extremely low income level. There is currently in our country, there's not one single county in the entire US that has enough housing for people below 30% of AMI. Right. Not a fucking county. So across the country, there's a need. Demand is always going to exceed supply. There are wait lists that are hundreds of people long to try and get into an apartment complex like this. Because if I am making very little money, if I make $1,000 a month, my rent here is going to be $300. And HUD will pay the difference between the $300 and whatever the market rent is. There's a lot of demand for this.
Does everybody there pay the same amount for this?
Everybody pays 30% of their income. So it depends on the tenant income. So there's always a range, right? Like Brett might pay $500, you might pay $82. It's just a function of how much money you make, and it's a percentage of your income.
And then talk about what's the application process to get.
So for a tenant,
yeah,
the application process. Yeah, so tenants can apply either through centralized waiting lists at the housing authority, or they can apply at specific properties that they know. And basically, you're just putting your name on a wait list, and every property runs their wait list a little bit differently, but there's some fair housing standards required for wait lists. And then the move-in criteria, they do criminal background checks, they'll do, landlord credit checks, and you can have different move-in criteria for each deal. And you have to do income verification. There's some forms that the residents have to fill out. It can be frustrating and challenging to the residents at times, but it's not meant to be overly burdensome. It's just meant for people to prove that they do qualify to live there. There's some asset disclosures and things like that. But the demand is well. It's why I tell people they want to invest in affordable housing. I sort of say it in kind of a snarky way when I'm talking to LPs, and they say, well, I'm not so sure. I'm like, look, man, if you think that our country is somehow going to build more affordable housing than we need, if you think there's going to be a surplus of affordable homes in this country, then don't give me your fucking money. Then don't invest in affordable housing. But if you don't think that, if you do think that we will continually fail to provide enough affordable housing, then affordable housing is a decent place to invest.
Well, and I think part of the issue, which I think I've brought up on prior episodes, is if you just in hanging out with what Elliot shared just about the timing of this, right? So the whole thesis of maybe altruistic or whatever, you're going to go spend money, make it a nicer 70s vintage product, and we're going to increase your rent by 600 to 1,300 bucks, but we're all doing this out of the goodness of our heart. But it's going to take us 12 to 18 months to get approval to do this, and that's on an existing building. And then if you're talking about delivering, and Elliot, you feel free to tell me that I'm completely off base here, but to get a new development out of the ground is even harder. That takes more time. So yeah. I think to where, if you, in my opinion, to help with the affordable housing crisis dynamic, whatever we want to call it, which I think is a big thing. I think most people in America agree with that. I took one econ class, but I do remember this concept of supply and demand. So if you want rents to level off or go down, introduce more supply. It's not that hard.
Of any kind. It does not matter.
Suits,
of any
housing,
kind. Yep.
Cars, whatever.
Yeah, you can build a whole bunch of Class A housing. It's going to have the ripple effect of driving down pricing everywhere.
Right.
But these things are like, I think anytime you get in a situation where the consumer, where somebody else is paying the bill, things get jacked. Like you ever get your windshield replaced and the guy shows up, it's like you don't even know what it costs. The insurance is like, and then they just leave with a smile on their face. And I don't know if he got paid $1,500 or $5 or whatever. I think all these kind of, go to the doctor's office, same thing. All I know is my health insurance premium went up 15% this year. And I don't know what the doctor's getting paid.
Right. Yeah. I will say one thing about this deal, not in defense of the buyer, but maybe just some context would be helpful. Yes, the buyer's getting a $14 million development fee. It is a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money. It's a lot of money. They are also, as part of the tax credit program, they effectively sell 99.99% of the property to their tax credit investor. The tax credits go to the property. They don't go to the developer. So the way your limited partner tax credit investor maximizes their investment is they have to own almost all of the property. So it's very common for the GP who's getting paid this big development fee to only end up owning 0.01% of the real estate.
Which is code for they didn't have to put any money in the deal.
They don't have to put any money in the deal. I've done deals like this. Our GP co-invest has been like $100. But the challenge is, and people think, well, you're getting $14 million and you own this great real estate and you're going to sell it again. GP's going to make a bunch. They often don't make a ton of money on the back end. Typically, the limited partner investor is negotiating the partnership docs and saying, Eric, you're the GP, you get the development fee, but we're going to take 90% of the back end. We're going to take 90% of the cash flow and 90% of the back end. So I'm not saying feel bad for these developers, but it's not as though they get the $14 million fee and they get 100% of the proceeds and the tax credit LP is just like along for the ride. Tax credit LP is going to take a pound of flesh.
I still don't understand why that $14 million doesn't get arbitraged away. That somebody's pay that you say it's 14, well, I'll do it for 13. Well, some other guy says I'll do it for 10. I'll do it for 8. And it gets back.
It often does.
It would get back
often
to
does.
reasonableness.
Yeah, this is a fluke deal that it would be this much money. It's also just a colossal waste of dollars to spend $615,000 a unit on some 70s, I mean, whatever. But no, it's not. That's atypical, but it does happen. And so people want to talk about where's the waste in the affordable housing system. I mean, it's not super hard to find, and these are public records. It's not like some confidential email that I have with the CEO of the development company. This is just in the Travis County public records.
And it does seem like, it's the conversation that we've had before of like complex systems end up having the opposite of the desired result. So if the desired result here is to provide cheap housing, affordable housing,
is anything but.
Yeah, you've done that for a handful, for as many people as possible. You've not done that because you've limited the number of people to 199 that are going to get this benefit when it could have been, 600 people.
Right. And when the primary economic motive is fees, you'll see, like, I haven't even gotten into how all those fees are spent, but the financing fees are egregious because there's so many consultants and bond issuance fees and housing authority fees. And it's just, when fees are the primary motive, everyone lines up to take a piece.
Yeah. Anyone ever tells you it's not about the money, it's 100% about the money.
The corollary to this, to anyone listening, when you get approached by a market rate GP who pitches you a 3% acquisition fee on the purchase price, that guy is fucking you. He just is. That guy's fucking you over. That's not right. You shouldn't get paid 3% of the purchase price as an acquisition fee at closing. No, I've gotten into this debate on Twitter with some of my smoother brained friends. I'm like, guys, this is not right. Like, you're just collecting fees. You're not allocating. It's not investing. We got to keep the lights on.
That always reminds me of a car dealership. And when Mike, remember the great Mike Vick, who was the Atlanta quarterback?
Oh yeah,
yep.
The guy that burned through. I think he was like the first guy to ever have $100 million contract, and then 2 years later he's busted. But he had a posse of guys hanging around as helpers. Apparently, Mike decided he wanted a Bentley, so he gets one on order, and they say, "Yes, sir, Mr. Vick. It's come in. We've got the color you want, everything." Anyway, one of his guys shows up to pick up the Bentley with a check, and he says, whatever a Bentley costs, $200,000 or whatever. He says, "Okay, so I make it out to who?" And he goes, "So would it be cool if I made it out for $220, and then you could hit me with some cash back?" Basically, the whole premise of affordable housing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. I hear you when you say it costs $200, but I'm gonna round up here, and you just send a little of that back my way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A little something for the effort here, for my time to pick up this car.
Yeah. So I apologize for monopolizing this one, but I thought going off on a rant about affordable housing would be a fun change of pace. And we haven't done one, and it's the thing that I do.
Fantastic.
But it is complicated, and I agree with your comment about. I think the affordable guys do deserve a little bit more in the way of not paying, especially when they're wearing hoodies. But I mean, it's hard, just from a compliance standpoint. You're working through all this stuff you mentioned, Elliot. I mean, it's a materially different ball game than just your conventional down the middle of the fairway apartment deal.
Yeah, it is. It's a different animal. It really is. And it can, when done right, it can have unbelievable outcomes for people. And when done wrong, you end up spending dollars in a way that I think could be better allocated somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I'll go first. I don't understand how all that math works, so I can't be a buyer.
Okay. Got it.
I still don't get it. The 19th time somebody's tried to explain it. I don't get it.
I'd love to be a buyer. Sign me up for the 14 in fees.
Eric's a buyer. I mean, this is my business, so I suppose I'm a buyer. So we're 2 out of 3.
Well, all right. If you guys are in, I'm in. I mean, peer pressure is a real pain.
I under.
Not a buyer. Seriously, who would not do that?
Yeah.
There's no risk in your cash flow. Who would not do it?
Right. Yep.
The full
interesting deal.
States government putting $14 million in your pocket.
Yeah. Sounds like a good deal to me.
Yeah.
I've changed my mind. I'm in.
Mark me down.
Yeah. Put me down for 1.
Okay.
So, all right. So we get to ring the bell. We
got some buyers.
We got buyers ringing the bell, baby.
Hello, Travis County.
Gents, this has been a fun one.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Elliot.